Hi, everybody, and welcome in to a Sunday night, Monday morning podcast. My good buddy Matt Mosley, who does the Doomsday podcast with Ed Werder, the popular Dallas Cowboys podcast, has been in Oxnard, California this week at Dallas Cowboys training camp. And so he's going to join me for about 25 minutes and give us sort of the insight on the Dallas Cowboys. I look forward to that. Matt's a very, very funny guy. Two takes before we start that. So, one of the things that I think is important to realize when I talk to young people, high school or college, and I don't do it very often, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I'll talk to a broadcasting class. The one thing I always say is don't produce your show through social media. It's a funhouse mirror. It's not really life. So, a prime example of that is that the movie Barbie. I have not seen it. I'm going to probably see Oppenheimer and Barbie this week. It's summer. It's slow. It's late July, early August. I got nothing but time to kill. It's that or a Twins Guardians game. All up for the movie. But if you go to social media, you would think Barbie is controversial, highly political, very difficult to stomach if you're a moderate or you lean right. I now have officially 9 people, either in my family or who work at the Volume. 9 for 9 loved it. I have no idea about their political affiliation. I have no idea. I don't ask my kids. Barbie's a really good movie. Great acting. Funny. Everybody had the same take. Clever, funny, makes you think, good laughs. It's not Hangover in terms of sheer comedic value. Nobody presented it like that. Or Animal House. It's a broad movie with a lot of different views and ideas, and it'll make you think. But if you go to social media, you'd think it's highly controversial. Virtually nobody dislikes it. And the people who do go online and get clicks. And that's something I try to tell people all the time, that nobody is really outraged that Twitter is now called X. Nobody. Absolutely nobody really cares. Nobody thinks Barbie is highly controversial, except people seeking attention on social media. So you enjoy your social media apps. You enjoy Barbie. Don't think for a second you're walking into a trap that will politically shift your views. It's a movie. And a lot of people wear pink when they go. That's it. Second thought. So Sean Payton fires at Nathaniel Hackett. Day later, regrets saying it and apologizes. Aaron Rodgers, talking to Peter Schrager, fires back at Sean Payton, calls him insecure, and should keep his favorite coach's name out of his mouth. This is good old-fashioned 1985 media. Before everybody was terrified to be canceled and criticized and the avalanche that follows. This happened all the time. People were outspoken. Buddy Ryan would rip Mike Ditka. Buddy Ryan would rip Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson would rip Buddy Ryan. And it was wildly entertaining. But there's so much money in sports now. Everybody's afraid to lose their position, their job, their tenure, their gig. Sean Payton was in one of those moods, an intense guy, said something. He regretted a day later. Aaron Rodgers defended his coach. I loved both Peyton's willingness to offend and Aaron Rodgers' tenacity on defending Nathaniel Hackett. I think Hackett, from what I've been told, and I've been many of my contemporaries, I've got a lot of sources in the league. Hackett's one of the nicest guys in the league. Good dad, good father, wonderful guy. Just doesn't have an edge, doesn't have a bite to him, and you kind of sort of have to have that. The 5 best head coaches in my lifetime, I think of Walsh and Belichick and Andy Reid and Jimmy Johnson and Bill Parcells. They've all got an edge. Bill Walsh had a bite. Andy Reid had a bite. We all know Belichick, Parcells, and Jimmy Johnson had a bite. Hackett doesn't. He's a coordinator. He's a position coach. Nothing wrong with that at all. Kyle Shanahan was a great coordinator, became a great coach. Dan Quinn's a great coordinator. Tried the coaching, okay, probably gets a second chance. We don't know if he's a great head coach. We know he's a great coordinator defensively. I like these little whizzing matches, these little media scrums. I think they're healthy. I think they're fun. Nobody gets hurt. And the winner is you and me and the consumer. When we lose is when people are terrified to be authentic and afraid to be honest. I've been doing radio for 30 years, almost 30 years, 25 years. I'm on the air live. Some things I say don't come out right. Some things I say are a little harsh. Some things aren't as funny as I think. It's an imperfect world. You take some big swings. It's not edited. Not every time you ask a quarterback or a coach an opinion, it should be fully edited. I don't want PR people around it. Peyton didn't have a PR person around him, and Aaron Rodgers didn't have a PR person around him, and it was really, really interesting, raw content. Loved them both. Summer is heating up, and so is pro baseball. You can certainly watch your favorite baseball team on television, but there is nothing like being at the ballpark to watch your favorite team. For last minute, amazing deals to see your favorite baseball team live. Check out Game Time, the fastest growing ticket app in the United States. And it doesn't stop in sports. July means huge summer concerts and huge comedy shows all over the country. And Game Time is the place. They have all your tickets. Download the Game Time app and the redeem code Colin. That's me, COLIN, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, it's simple. Download the Game Time app and the code is COLIN. And with it, you get $20 off. $20. No matter where you live, wherever. Go out and have some fun this week. Download Game Time today. It's so easy. Last minute tickets, concerts, Major League Baseball, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, my guy Matt Mosley, Doomsday Podcast with Ed Werder. He's been embedded with the Cowboys in Oxnard. It's hot as you know what in California. We usually, first of all, it rained like Seattle in the winter, and now it feels like Louisiana in the summer. It's humid and hot. So what you've been to so many of these things. This feel like just another one?
No. I mean, I have been to a lot of them. And by the way, nobody cares about any Southern California heat wave. I landed back in Dallas at 105. All right. It was 101 at about 9 o'clock when I landed, about 100 or something like that. Yeah. So speaking of 100, I just came from my grandmother's 100th birthday celebration. All right.
Wow.
So Frances Hendricks Lawrence has turned 100. So pretty neat.
What's the secret to her life?
Boy, there's been a lot of clean living involved in that. Church secretary for many, many years. Had about a 25-year run there, but she comes from a long line of people who live a long time. And when my grandfather passed away, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago, just never missed a beat. It was just kind of like, you know what, I got to keep rolling here. And so as of today, even, I mean, she was the belle of the ball. Everybody came, she had something to say to everybody. She knew who everybody was. And so
wow.
It's pretty awesome to watch, and we're extremely fortunate.
So how does this camp feel different?
I think the McCarthy thing makes it different with the play calling. He's handling himself in a different manner than when I've been around him. And I think Jerry, with each passing year, and Jerry's into his 80s now, I think Jerry sometimes has a little bit different way about him. I don't want to call it an edge, really, but Jerry, for one of the first times that I can recall, was all business at the State of the Union address to start. He's generally known for saying something off the wall in that setting, and he didn't even make an opening statement. I mean, we're all set, we're set up to hear him talk before anybody asks a question for at least 20 minutes. And literally, they just started the news conference, and he said, "Okay, let's go with some questions. What do y'all have?" So, there's always I think it's hard to have a sense of urgency. There are better places to have a sense of urgency than in Oxnard because of where we're used to being and how it feels and how much nicer it is and the surroundings and everything. But I mean, McCarthy met with his player council the night before that State of the Union and got a vibe that, the team sort of has a little edge, and they don't even have the pads on yet. Pads come on tomorrow. So to me, there was a little more edginess from the team to start a training camp. It's usually very laid back, not much going on. And I think they've sensed that, a couple of 12-win seasons, not being able to get by San Francisco, like if they're ever going to do it, like it almost has to be this season.
Well, Zach Martin, 10th year in Dallas, 8-time All-Pro. Jerry said, "I'm not budging on the contract." This is one of the rare times I support Jerry. They made him the highest paid guard when he signed. He was for many of the years of his contract. He has made more money than any guard in the NFL that's been in the league for 10 years. And he's got a couple years left on his contract. And, Patrick Mahomes right now is the 7th highest paid quarterback. Do you think that's I don't think Jerry should budge, but do you think this could get ugly, surly?
No, because Zach is not really, he's not up to that. Zeke was willing a few years ago to stare Jerry down. And Zach doesn't have that in him. And I'm not even saying what Zeke did was wrong. Zeke did it because he knew his value and the Cowboys cratered. They know they don't have to. If Zach truly didn't show up, that's a big problem. You can't start the season without your all-pro right guard. They don't really have anybody to turn to in that regard.
Yeah.
But what you heard in Jerry's voice was the fact that, hey, there's 2 years left on his contract. What's he talking about? And to your point, Colin, he got his rookie contract. He's a first-round pick. And then he got another contract. And so Jerry's kind of right. Everybody loves Zach, and it's not like – and the other thing is he's a veteran, and he's so good, and he's so good at staying prepared that I don't know any other position, and Zeke came in and was kind of ready to go at the last minute. This guy could be. So I don't sense any worry. And I think, you heard Dak was quoted saying, "Pay the man," talking about Zach, and Jerry was asked about that. And Jerry had a very funny answer, which was, "Well, we pay the quarterbacks all the money."
That is funny. By the way, I saw that Zeke visited the Patriots. Yeah. You always said Zeke was a little bit the soul of the locker room. Now that he's gone, do you still believe that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was sending messages to the team on the eve of their first practice. I think in the meeting room, the running backs, they're still hearing from him. Tony Pollard still brings him up. People are there's still an aura about him. Now, he had faded some of his playing ability. So you're okay moving away from that. But yeah, there's still some, and that's what the call that Bill Belichick made was to Stephen Jones. And he just wanted to know kind of where Zeke was. And Ed and I had a chance to go one-on-one with Stephen, or 2-on-1. And that was one of the things Stephen talked about, was just his how he went on and on about Zeke and what he could mean in one of those running back rooms. So, it tells you all you need to know, though, on how much he has left in the tank, on the fact that he's still out there. He's a workhorse. He's played through all sorts of injuries. He's not. I don't know if he's anywhere close to a lead back anymore. It's one of the few positions you can go from. Think about that. Last year, the starter, even though Pollard took over, he was almost a symbolic starter. This year, he can't even get a role on a team. He can't even get out there. But Belichick has had a way over the years of taking chances on certain veteran players that maybe have some dings on their character. This guy, he had some issues, obviously, he was suspended for several years ago. But in terms of like what the players think of him and the coaches, other than maybe Dak, there's no one who approaches Zeke in that regard.
Dallas, they face the AFC East, so they get the Patriots and the Jets and the Dolphins and the Bills. By no means is that easy. They also get the 49ers and the Chargers, both out west. It's an interesting schedule where, you've got 2 games against Washington they should fare well. If they split against the Giants or split against the Eagles, there's a couple of layups. They're going to go to Arizona early. That feels like a layup. Again, they face the Carolina Panthers. Carolina does not have Dallas's personnel. They don't. That feels like a W. There's some absolute lock W's. But this is by no means, when you got games at San Francisco, at the Chargers, a Seahawks game at home, at the Bills, at the Dolphins, this feels like a little bit tougher schedule than normal. And here's my take, is that Jets week 2, Patriots week 4, Niners week 5, Chargers week 6, Eagles week 7. Go back to Mike McCarthy. Do you feel like his teams, Andy Reid teams, come right out of the gate? Belichick's take a little baking. They take a little work. With McCarthy, what is your sense in September since he arrived?
Well, I think I think for the most part, there have been lulls in these seasons. But it really has more to do with Dak's injuries. Mike has had some pretty bad luck as far as losing Dak, losing players, injuries, that kind of thing. I think if everybody's healthy, I see a fast start. I'm not buying years ago. When Favre went to Minnesota, I said it's going to make an enormous change, and I thought Minnesota had a real shot at the Super Bowl, and they ended up doing that. I'd have a really hard time just because Rodgers, in his past greatness, I just don't see that Jets game. I also think it's a chance. McCarthy's a little embarrassed about what happened to him in Green Bay last year. That was a huge reunion. That was his first time back. They had a lead. They had like a 14 or maybe 17-point lead, and they let it get away from him against a bad Green Bay team. And I think McCarthy thinks he's got something on his hands here. I think he thinks he has like a. We've had these 12 win seasons. I think, and Jerry's trying to hide it. He's trying to hide it the best he can, but I heard what you just said, and no one in the business remembers a schedule quite like you. The way you commit these things to memory, I just brag on you all the time about it. But I think we're talking, Cowboys have a shot at 14 wins.
I had a little cheat sheet here, by the way. So Deuce Vaughn, 5'5". I swear to God, Kansas State unveils one of these about every 4 or 5 years. We get one of these Darren Sproles, Deuce Vaughn running backs from K-State. It looks so strange when you see the videotape, when you see the stuff, the highlights. Is he going to make the team? What's the story on him?
Yeah, his dad's a scout on the team.
Yes.
And he's really close with Sproles. He talks to Sproles all the time. Deuce Vaughn does. You're going to love this guy. If you ever have a chance to have him on, he's a fun, smart dude. He came from a great Texas high school down kind of the Austin area, a Central Texas kid, kind of hill country. He is, I think, now they've had problems in the past. They've said, okay, we want to turn this guy into some kind of matchup problem. And they always love running these end arounds or jet sweeps. Oh, we're going to get this guy 10. Tavon Austin, remember him? And it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to get him 10 to 15 touches a game. They couldn't get him 3 touches. So it remains to be seen, but in space, and think about some of these, even other than Sproles, was it Tarek Cohen or somebody like that? There's been some of these little guys. Quentin Griffin years ago came out of Oklahoma. If they'll get him in among the trees, behind these offensive linemen. They can kind of jump around and do some things. And so I think he's a perfect complement, and they're looking for every way in the world to use him. In fact, they've got him as the punt protector. All right, so that's going to be an odd thing. When they snap it back there, you got a 5'5" man, and the Bones Fossil said he was going to be able to out-leverage anybody. Now, I don't want to see him just get engulfed. I could see somebody running over him back there, but also, who loves to do fake punts more than anybody? It's this guy, Bones Fossil. So here's a fake punt option. He is a total gadget guy, like huge gadget guy. But what Sproles was about a half-inch taller than this guy, but but Deuce is thicker. I always thought Sproles was like strong, huge legs, almost like Robert Newhouse type legs, and this guy's thick. And you're right. They put those. I've seen all the memes and everything. They put those little protective helmet things on. He looks like a Martian or something, but he is fast. And he was on Kansas State, just won Big 12 title. I mean, and he was an enormous part of that.
Yeah, they're good again this year, by the way. They'll probably finish second to Texas. They return a ton of starters. Hey, so when Kellen Moore left, he was unemployed for about an hour. And same thing with Andy Reid. Andy Reid was unemployed, for a couple of days, and Kansas City reached out. And Kellen Moore was unemployed briefly, and the Chargers reached out. Do we know exactly why? I mean, stuff is printed, but a story softens 3 months, 6 months after, a story. Now it's about the Cowboys and about the Chargers. There's no animosity. Do we know exactly why Kellen Moore left? Was there a moment, an epiphany, a game, a series, or something that didn't work?
Well, I mean, it was Dak. And somebody had to take the blame for those interceptions. And the fact that he played so poorly, he had a beautiful game against the Bucs and then horrible against the 49ers. And somebody had to pay, and it wasn't going to be McCarthy. And also something Jerry's known for doing, and I've got a lot of friends out there who've worked for him, and he's pretty nice about this. He gives you some time. Hey, go find another job. Okay, we're not going to fire you right away. Just take some time. Go find another job. And so they kind of allowed I would imagine the Chargers thing to kind of get settled and be ready, because that thing happened too quickly for the Chargers to have waited. Oh, I wonder if they're going to fire Kellen Moore. I would say within 24 to 48 hours after the Cowboys season ended, Kellen Moore was told, hey, look around. And then he was brought over there. And I did think it was funny, by the way. Brian Schottenheimer has the title of the offensive coordinator. I mean, he was so different than Kellen Moore. I got to talk to Schottenheimer the other day. We had they had the big news conference for him, and then he did a one-on-one with Ed for our Doomsday podcast after I had to kind of fly back for my grandmother's birthday. And Schottenheimer, it was like night and day. Schottenheimer put on a show. I mean, just was in his element, loved it. I mean, it was like, man, I'm here. Nobody's talked to me in a while. I'm going to give you guys one of the greatest press conferences you've ever seen. Kellen is not that guy. That's why people have a little trouble envisioning him as a head coach. Now, if he does really well with the Chargers, he's going to get a shot. But think of one of those boy wonders who just has kind of come across, at least publicly, as kind of like, man, there's not much there. I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, nobody cares. Mike Martz was a weirdo. I mean, he just kind of that's how he kind of came across. But when they were putting up huge numbers, nobody cared about that. And maybe that'll be the way with Kellen. But he's certainly not somebody who's going to go in and win a press conference. I assure you of that. No.
Yeah, and one of the reasons they like him with Herbert, Justin Herbert's really quiet. Now, I know Justin pretty well, but I mean, Justin has avoided the media as well as any LA athlete I've ever seen. And so he and Kellen are kind of sit in a film room and work. There'll be no clash of egos or personalities. They're chess players. So I think the Chargers saw him as a perfect fit for a Joe Lombardi was a bit more rigid as a play caller. Kellen's more amenable to listen to a young guy. But I think you're right. I've talked about this before. Not every coordinator is a great coach. Dan Quinn has been a great defensive coordinator twice. He was an okay head coach. It's okay. I think, there's a lot of hot seat talk with Mike McCarthy. And I look at that early schedule. I think I've always seen Jerry as a bit more patient. He'll give Chan Gailey an extra 6 games or a year. He gave Jason Garrett 2 more years than many thought. I've always looked at Jerry in terms of coaches as fairly patient. Am I wrong?
No, he was not patient when it came to, Jimmy and going back to all that. That was a huge personality thing. It's funny you brought up Chan. That's one of his biggest regrets as an owner, that he gave up on Chan too quickly. So he kept Jason Garrett a long time. Jerry likes head coaches who allow him to be Jerry, and don't mind the parade coming through, and Jerry showing up at the fights and showing up when, just kind of being up in front. And Mike doesn't really care about that. Now, much like Wade Phillips, Mike does have a little bit of thin skin. And at some points, I asked him about some of his play calling. He had talked about looking at films back to 2000, back when he was calling plays at New Orleans, to go back and look at that. And I said, well, what'd you think? What'd you think when you went back and looked at yourself as a play caller? And he kind of bristled a little bit, and he's like, well, go look it up. I was the assistant coach of the year that year. And I was like, okay. I mean, he did it in kind of a joking way, and we had a nice laugh about it. But yeah, he's kind of, but that said, he doesn't mind all the Jerry stuff. Now, what bugs him a little bit, like we were a tent over while he was doing his news conference Saturday morning, talking to Steven, like doing our interviews. I don't know if he could see that, but I do think from time to time, Mike notices when those of us in the media are off talking to somebody else instead of him. Kind of like,
right.
That's not how they did in Green Bay.
Now, give us a little hint. Give my audience a little hint. You interviewed Stephen Jones with Ed Werder. I don't want you to give the whole present, but was there a moment in the interview that is worthy, that we're worthy of getting here at the Volume? Because it was a pretty good interview, you told me, with Stephen Jones. What was your takeaway overall on it?
There was one moment that he talks about Dak turning 30, and Dak, and he mentions a Super Bowl, and he doesn't do that as much as Jerry, but kind of brings that up. And no Cowboys quarterback in his 30s has ever won a Super Bowl, and it really, to me, spoke to the sense of urgency of this guy's 30. He wants to get it done now, and he put special emphasis this year, and this is not always a this year team. This is let's be competitive. They want credit for winning a bunch of division titles, but that's not what the team should be measured on, given its illustrious past. But it's been a long, long time. It's been a long time since all that happened. And as I've often told you, if they even made it to the NFC title game, everybody would have 10-year extensions. Like, it's not, everybody thinks it's Super Bowl or bust. I don't think that's the case. But I do think it's been so long since they've been 1996, since they've been to an NFC title game, or 95 season. It can't go on anymore. Like, it's year after year after year, and they think that they have this window right now, and they have a couple of stars on defense. And Colin, we've talked about in the past, they've been kind of they've been bare at wide receiver, and they've entered these seasons, and they just don't have enough firepower there. With Brandon Cooks, CeeDee Lamb, a renewed Gallup, who's back to full health, and then Jalen Tolbert, at least in the first 4 days of camp where I attended, putting on a show. They're jacked up at wide receiver, and obviously they think Pollard has more juice than certainly what Zeke was showing. So anyway, I thought there was a lot of different ways. Also, the Stephen on the rookies, there's some stuff I think folks might enjoy there.
Yeah, I think the Niners have the best roster in the NFC, and I think Dallas and Philadelphia are somewhere in that second spot, depending on the unit. Dallas has Micah, so they get the edge at linebacker. I would say the Eagles get the edge at offensive line. Both have very capable quarterbacks. Hurts may be a little more talented, but I think if you looked in the AFC, I would not consider Dallas. I wouldn't give them a faint chance to make the AFC Championship. But they knock off the Jets early. They beat the Giants in the opener. It's a 2-0 start. They're healthy. You start stockpiling wins. You get a couple W's against the Commanders. You don't have to win all those Bills, Miami road games. You look up, you've got 11 wins. You don't have the bye, but you're opening up in your first playoff game at home against Seattle. That's a really winnable game. I think take the Niners out. That because of Brock Purdy, they don't pay anything for quarterbacks, so they basically have a stacked 1987 roster. I think Philadelphia and Dallas probably are somewhere fighting for the second best roster in the NFC. That's my take. Does that seem far-fetched?
No, I don't. I think it's interesting. Hurts was so great last season. I mean, let's see him back that up. And
without Shane Steichen, by the way, who may do wonders for Anthony Richardson. That's going to be one of the stories. That Jonathan Taylor Colts thing, what people aren't talking about, Matt, is that are the Colts coaches watching Anthony Richardson and saying, folks, we have a quarterback/running back. We don't need to pay a star running back. Because if you look at the backup running backs for the Colts, they're not Jonathan Taylor. But Shane Steichen, rookie year with Justin Herbert, 2 years with Jalen Hurts, the guy does wonders with young quarterbacks, right? So I'm fascinated by the Colts situation. I do wonder if Jalen Hurts, I think we both love him, but I do wonder if he takes a step back. He goes from A+ to A-, if he just takes a tad step back.
Yeah, that could happen, and I just think from a leadership standpoint, Dak he's at a different level, but he has to back it up at some point. And he had some introspective things to say, about like it happening and feeling so easy for him in 2016 when he started, and that it may have messed with his mind a little bit. Well, he's turning 30. I think he was legitimately embarrassed by the turnovers, all the interceptions, and that's a McCarthy. McCarthy is now. It was fun to watch at camp because he was like a little kid. He reverted back to being a quarterback's coach, back in the day, even before, when he was like back in the late 1990s. He did not leave the side of the quarterbacks. And then I thought he was kidding at one point. He said, well, are you still going to go to the defensive meetings and that kind of thing? And he said, no. Basically, that part of my coaching life, or at least for now, is over. I mean, it's all in, it's all offense. And this is getting back to where Jerry always said he was the most comfortable, which was having like a Jason Garrett, having the offensive coach or the defensive coach do it all. He didn't like the walk-around coach. And so I don't know why they had to wait this long to do it. But, boy, McCarthy, the way he's behaving on the field and all, it's like he's more of an offensive coordinator than a head coach, which is kind of interesting because the team kind of has two head coaches. And one of the reasons he can act like this now is because Quinn, that's a pretty interesting thing, Colin, that Quinn has stayed around even when he had opportunities. Because the two of those guys, things could have gotten awkward. And Quinn is one of those rare guys who recognize what you brought up earlier, that, hey, I got all this talent. I'm getting paid huge money. I'm at this marquee place. If I keep doing this, I'm going to keep getting opportunities. Why do I need to jump back in and be a head coach? Is it just for ego or something? It is very rare when a coach actually realizes I might be better at this than that. And Quinn sort of gets that. So it sets up you've got a defensive head coach and an offensive head coach, which sounds like it could be awkward. The only time it could be awkward is they do have a great interim head coach, right? If things went south. But right now it looks like it works pretty nicely for them. And I'm just saying, Mike's through going into any defensive meetings.
Well, I felt Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll felt like a little bit that, where you had a guy that was a brilliant young offensive coordinator who kind of ran the offense. He leaves. The offense doesn't look as good. McDermott pretty much let him run it. So I don't think that's bad at all. I mean, when a lot of times, Pete Carroll's running the defense, Dan Quinn on the defense, he needs to leave, right? Like he's getting Kirby Smart needed to leave Nick Saban. But I think Dan Quinn, I think he is a star in his own right. So I think you get that, you get that occasionally. D'Amico Ryans with Kyle Shanahan. Kyle gave him the defense. You be a star. If you want to leave, leave. But that part about Dallas I actually like. I like having a rock star. I mean, I think Quinn's on a short list of one of the 3 best coordinators in football. I don't think there's many. Now that Steichen is a head coach and Dable's a head coach, I think Dan Quinn's a top 2 to 3 coordinator in the NFL. That's never a bad thing to me.
No. And you match that up with the most dynamic defender in the NFL at this point, with Micah Parsons, a guy who knows how to deploy and change things up. And as somebody was saying the other day, this guy hasn't even really figured out pass rushing yet. Like he's this big of a threat, and he's still learning how to be a pass rusher. Like that's not what he grew up doing. And if he figures it all out, I mean, he's a holy terror.
All right, Mosley, so you're back home in Texas now. I hope a cooling trend awaits you at some point. You guys have had quite a steamer this summer.
Yeah, we have. I have thought about next week going to Boulder to welcome the Colorado Buffs back to our Big 12, and I think that would be a nice, cool environment. And there's been some excitement with that. So the Big 12 that a lot of people dismissed has come roaring back, and the Pac-9 is in a bit of a pit.
We're going to be inviting schools from Idaho and directional schools. And I saw a story today, Washington and Oregon are listening to the ACC. Mm-hmm. And it's like, good hell. What's happened to the – you know what, though? I say this all the time. I grew up – I loved the Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8. I loved it. But the downside of the West Coast as a collegiate conference is Seattle, San Francisco, Phoenix, Los Angeles have got dozens of pro teams. And it's the passion filling the stadiums and arenas is harder. It's not Waco. It's not Stillwater. It's not Madison, Wisconsin. It's not Starksville, Mississippi. Out west, we got the mountains, we got the beaches, we got the lakes, we got pro sports. It's harder to get people on a Saturday to jam into a college stadium. And frankly, the Big 12 passion is better than the Pac-12 passion. And I think Colorado realizes it.
Well, and they had a chance, by the way, to do some big merger when the Big 12 was in trouble after Texas and OU left, and Klevkoff and the rest of the Pac-12 kind of laughed at the Big 12 leftovers. And since then, they made some good moves, brought some teams in, and this Brett Yormark, you've probably had him on already at some point, but he needs to be on the volume. He needs to be on a podcast with you because he is a fascinating guy. And I learn more and more about him all the time. And I love kind of seeing a basketball guy who comes from entertainment try to he's galvanized all these football people, and he's even convinced them, hey, we may be able to go find a whole nother revenue stream based off basketball. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff he's doing should have been thought about forever. Is like, hey, why don't you, instead of just constantly on these media rights deals, go find some of these other streams. Go find, get some basketball-only money. Build the greatest basketball conference you could ever have. And they're on their way to doing it.
Yeah. If they steal Arizona,
yes,
and you put Arizona with Kansas and Missouri and, Texas always has talent, although they're leaving. Obviously, Baylor's become a powerhouse. So you throw Arizona schools, especially Tucson, is a great basketball program. You get all worked up on. I don't want to take the attention away from your excellent Cowboy stories today because you're very, very embedded, and I thought you really brought your A game today, considering you're in sweltering heat for the last 2 months.
It's been a little rough, but we're gonna make it. And man, just like most years, I always kind of roll into LAX, and my thought is all my buddies, Colin, Dave, Greg, all these names that have been great friends for years that we're going to hang out. It didn't quite happen. I think that's a 17th consecutive year. But one of these years we'll make it happen.
Good seeing you, buddy.
All right. Good night.